Yes, the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yes. Let the record show that Mr. Dunn is absent, all other board members are present. Public notice has been given, it was sent on 11/3. Mrs. Coleman. We'll go on to the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the prior meeting minutes of October 1st, 2025?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Gilling. There a second?
I'll second.
And then Mr. Axel, discussion. Mailing?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Right. To information, the summary of discussions from October 1st, 2025. Some closed in the board book are the talking points and topics that we got through. We got through the rest of GC1, all of GC2, and GC3. We got all the way down through professional development. Part of the purpose of this agenda topic is if anybody has any new information or thoughts, they can bring it to the table. Otherwise, we can move on to our discussion. Just as a reminder, we can always revise past things whenever we deem necessary to. As this is going to be a fluid process for a while as we get through these GCs and governing policies. So good to move on.
Yep.
All right, so we're on to then discussion. A discussion on governance culture policies. So as noted prior, we finished on professional development in GC3. And kicking this meeting off with the commitment to students under GC3. So again, as a reminder, we're just gonna do a round table. Everybody had the paperwork ahead of time just to do their notes. We're gonna do one section at a time, just to keep it moving quickly. So, students, what does it mean for us to be student-centered and adult-minded? How do we keep student success at the center of every decision? Should we define specific commitments? Example, equity, achievement gaps, career readiness. And with that, we will start with Mr. Bailey.
I didn't bring my notes, so I have to borrow some from Sure. For student centered and adult minded, obviously we need to be responsible to take care of the kids, make sure that they're our first priorities, that the decisions that we make are in their best interest and what's best for the district. Can't necessarily just take every single suggestion and just run with that. And student success, obviously, we've got to, that's the whole point. We have targets that we're going to define moving forward to make sure that we stay on track with our decisions and our conversations, make sure that we're not getting off track because of the nice shiny objects that might be floating around out there. The specific commitments, equity, achievement gaps, career readiness. Obviously, the equity, making sure that all the kids have the appropriate information that they need. Obviously, we have different learning levels, that it doesn't make sense to have a higher learning being taught across the board. And it doesn't make sense to go the opposite direction either. If the student has special needs, that we're addressing those in a fair manner to them and doing what's best for those individuals. Achievement gaps, we've obviously been working on those to close that, to help those that need extra support. So, I guess that would be off of our reporting with the assistance of Dr. Johnson. And career readiness would be making sure that our kids have a clue when they get out of here. Not necessarily what they're gonna do, but what they can do.
Good time around. This one hits me really quite deep, so I'm gonna try to be um, brief. What does it mean for us to be student-centered and adult-minded? I think as a board, as representatives of our community, we have to deeply know our community. And we also deeply need to try to understand the world around our community so that when we're preparing our students, when we're thinking about making sure that they have what they need when they need it and they have access to high quality education, that the skills that we are helping them develop in these buildings that we have here in our community, those are the skills that are going to be fruitful for them in their future, right? They're going to produce high achieving, happy, well functioning, people in society. And it goes beyond standards. And I think it's important for us to think about and to listen deeply to our community and ask them, what are our values? What are your values? But then go outside of the community and discover and try to uncover what is the next thing? What is the next set of skills that these students are going to need so that this technology world of innovation doesn't roll over the top of them, but they are at the top of it, right? And they can sustain themselves and their families and be happy in the life that they choose. So when you talk about equity, to me, equity is access. So for every student, whether they're a student who is, extremely high achieving on standardized tests or someone who struggles, everyone has access to high quality education and everyone has a high expectation of achievement, whatever that means for them. So when we think about achievement gaps, if we are equity minded, we're thinking in advance about what do students need to be able to get there. And if we can think about who our students are in advance, it's more likely we're going to be able to move them there. And then for career readiness, there's a lot of things that we can do as a community. And again, understanding what the businesses are in our local community and our surrounding community, but then also beyond that. And thinking about it, having conversations about how do those skills that are necessary to be successful in the future jobs, how are those being supported, coached, and taught here in the schools? When it comes to how do we keep students' success at the center of every decision, I couldn't agree more. It's data-driven goals. And I'm not sure what it means to be student-centered and adult-minded. I wasn't sure what adult-minded meant. For us, student-centered means that we make decisions on our students.
So I had making sure as many needs as possible are met for the students to help their personal achievements while teaching them about personal responsibility and accountability. Two things that when you become an adult is very important. And then as far as the specific commitments, the main focus should be on career readiness. That should be our main goal. Really none of that other stuff means anything if we graduate them and they're not ready for anything.
What does it mean to be student-centered, adult-minded? I put down here, we care about the students, we focus on the students, but as far as the adult-minded is we're using educated decisions to move forward for the students. How do we keep student success at the center of every decision? Everyone defines success differently for each student. Like the career readiness is what I put down on the bottom for the, whether they're gonna go to a job, whether they're gonna go to college or vocational school, you know, making sure that they're ready, the appropriate info and steps for each of their career goals are met. We need to make decisions on how it affects the student's success. And again, each student success is measured differently, but for that particular student, whatever they choose to do, the career readiness is it. If they're not ready for something after high school, then we've kind of failed.
I guess my answers kind of go along with the previous answers as well. I mean, to be student-centered and adult-minded, it's like obviously the focus is on the students and their needs and hopefully their future success, but adult-minded also means that sometimes the decisions that are made may not be immediately appreciated by students or whatever. I mean, that's part of being an adult. It's like sometimes they lack, or the future goals, achieving future goals might not be recognized immediately by the student, but sometimes the difficult decisions need to promote their future success. So sometimes there can be conflict along the way, at least from being a father and so forth. Yes, somebody has to lead the way, and it's not always met with happiness all the way around. But the goal is that ultimately it will be. How do we keep student success at the center of our decisions? I think, obviously by providing the opportunities in education, extracurricular activities, all those things are teaching methods that can be related to life once they graduate and enter the workforce or extra education. So I think trying to provide opportunities, but then it goes in kind of goes along with the next part of it with equity, achievement gaps, and career. Of course, the goal being focusing on the future success of students, but we can provide all the opportunities provided, but unless there's a motivation or a drive or a desire to succeed, success is not guaranteed. I mean, there has to be work put behind it on the individual too. So, how do we inspire kids? How do you create desire? Hopefully through positive reinforcement, I guess. And I guess at least providing the opportunities for success and achievement in that regard to try to prepare them for future success after they graduate and enter the workforce.
Well, I agree with almost everything that's been said. I don't know how much more I can offer, but what does it mean for us to be student-centered and adult-minded? I think every decision that we make, we do it with the student success in mind. I go back to our goals and priorities and, what do we want our students to know, understand, and be able to do? We have to just keep going back to that and making sure that they're achieving that. And everybody's achievement is done in a different way. And I think one of the things that I think really helps is by us offering the different programs that we do, because, it's one size doesn't fit all. And so it's nice that they have these opportunities to take advantage of these programs. I think every decision that we make, it's centered around the students to give them the most support that we can give them, to be successful in life. And I think that just like how we challenge students, every decision that we make, we have to challenge ourselves. And, are our ideals realistic? And how can we improve them? How can we make every student a success story?
Yeah, I agree with everybody. My summary is similar, but there's a few things that are different, so I'll just focus on those. So to me, adult-minded and career readiness kind of work together. Let the goals and priorities and strategic planning process drive a lot of our decisions, but also giving everybody from the district, the tools to do the job successfully, and then following through on everything as well. And focusing on tomorrow and keeping up with trends. Those are kind of my high points.
Mine made me think of, with these students in mind of being adult minded. Perfect example is the cell phone policy that we have. The kids would want to have some, if the kids want them, oh yeah, we'll let them have them, but we have to be that parent, we have to be that lead for them, and feedback from, that I've heard so far has been very positive, even from some of the kids that were the most against losing their phones for the day. They're finding out that it's actually a good thing for them. So those types of decisions that are not the easy ones, but the ones that are right though for the kids.
Any other discussion on commitment to students before we move on? We'll move on then to GC4, the board officer roles. I'll be honest with you. I had a hard time with this, so I look at how we currently are structured and then doing a lot of research online. We're not any different than anybody else. So I'm not really sure how far in the weeds or how much discussion we're really gonna have on some of these specific things. But I will point out that, if you got an idea, absolutely bring it out. We can absolutely, put it in the notes. But I feel like this particular set of governing culture policies for this coherent model probably might change as we go further down this road. So if you're like me, where you kind of struggled with this, don't feel bad, because I was kind of at a loss, especially doing all the research online and not really seeing anything that stood out as different to how we do it. So I'm assuming though, under board leadership and officer accountability, we'll probably have some decent discussion on that, but the meat and potatoes, as far as the roles, like I said, don't feel bad if you don't really have much to say to those. Might be something that we just change as we go. All right, so with that, board leadership, what should be the distinct roles of president, vice president, clerk, secretary, and treasurer? And how do we balance ceremonial duties like signing, chairing meetings, and with substantive leadership responsibilities? So with that, we'll kick it over to Mr. Sharp.
I didn't really put much down. I agree with you that most of these are defined. I mean, we're running under a certain type of government, right? And we've assumed that type of government. And so the roles and responsibilities I see as fit. If we get further down into the questions, I have some things that I wrote down that we could consider. But for the first two, I really didn't have anything to add.
Yeah, it was just presents a big question, obviously not knowing how districts that are already doing this type of governance are set up. So there's not a really good example that we can look for. So I pretty much had everybody saying how it's currently doing, obviously knowing that it may change down the road. For the leadership responsibilities, each board member has a vote. If they have concerns, please bring it to the board president, to the superintendent, for discussion. Maybe it'll be fruitful, maybe it'll go nowhere, but you always gotta be mindful that it may be a good idea and it doesn't hurt to discuss it.
First off, I'd like to say that I'm on two other boards, which will remain nameless. But this board, I feel, is the most organized, well-run, put together board that I am on. So as far as like these roles, yeah, the way we're doing things now, I mean, yeah, there's probably room for improvement because there's always room for improvement wherever we're at. But because of the other ones that I'm on and I'm researching a bunch of different things for that, I of course went to the internet for this one. What is the president's role? You know, it has a whole line of things. I'm going, that's a full-time job right there. You know, all of the president's roles, vice president, oh my goodness, another full-time job with all the stuff that it listed for the school board for a vice president, right down to the, you know, the clerk, the secretary, the treasurer. Oh my goodness, that's all the stuff that is listed on there. I mean, I went on for pages on that. I mean, seriously, I'm like, oh my goodness. But yeah, like you said, things will eventually be moved around, but balancing it all out, that's kind of something that I feel is kind of left in your position as far as to dictate what you want, who to want to do what, and balance things out. That's
Likewise, I really don't have much to add in this discussion, because this is the only structure I'm familiar with, so it's really hard to compare it to anything else when this is the only one that I have familiarity. So I guess as the governance project moves along and there needs to be some changes in how rules are defined, then I guess we'll take it up at that time. But as of right now, I really can't add anything to it.
Well, I put down, let's not make it too complicated. Just
Good answer, Kelly.
because like Tiffany mentioned, when you serve on different boards, you really do appreciate a well-run board, because you can really, you trust each other, you respect each other, but you also can make a decision and, not waste time. So I really do appreciate that. The one thing I think that each role should have is explained maybe more in detail, because if you Google that, and Tiffany is right, is that you learn all of a sudden like what the clerk is responsible for, and it's not just signing your name on a piece of paper. So, and sometimes that didn't get shared when you agreed to do that position. So I do think that that's something maybe that's just good for someone to know. But I mean, I have, I also appreciate the experience on the board, because I think I've been also on different boards where someone new joins and then right away they're made president the next year and then they resign, because that pressure of being put in those positions. So I appreciate this board and how well it's run.
Yeah, for the board leadership, I don't really have anything different than was already been said, to be honest with you. Because we do have, and I actually pulled up our current policies that kind of outline this already. And I read through it and I'm like, all right, don't really know what we're gonna change right now. So, as far as the board leadership part of this, I honestly don't really have much input as far as it changes or whatever to how we're signing things, chairing meetings and stuff like that. And as far as the distinct roles, it's already defined in policy. But as we go down this road, can redefine it however it works best. But to your point, let's not overcomplicate it either. That's one of the reasons why it's, things are as efficient as they are, is because it's a very top-down approach, not like a bunch of spaghetti thrown at the wall and
See what sticks.
yeah, yeah. So, we can move on to the president's role. I'm gonna go through these things. If you really don't have anything to add as a potential change in the future, just say I've got nothing to add, just, we'll just keep it moving pretty quick. So don't feel bad if you say I've got nothing to add, or no proposed changes. All right, so the president's role, should the president act primarily as a facilitator, spokesperson, or agenda setter? How much discretion should the president have in representing the board publicly? So, Mr. Delvin.
So typically that was pretty much what the president does now, so I didn't have nothing on that. The part about representing the board publicly, I think that's important that it comes from the president and it's one message. So like if there's some sort of public event or whatever, there's not 7 different opinions being put out there. It's just one thought. I think that's a lot cleaner.
That's exactly what I had.
Same.
I would agree with that 100%. The only thing that I think it's really important that, especially when something is going to be put into the public, to the public, that the entire board gets kept in that loop, so we're all know what's being said, and that we're, just in case we get asked questions and things like that.
No, agreed. We haven't had any super hot topics for a while, so we haven't had to do that fortunately, but that was a practice implemented early on. When I got on the board, was trying to compile the information and have one message be sent, and everybody's in tune to that same message, so that when you're approached, the message is the same, so. All right. Any other discussion on that? President's role?
I think for me, it was one voice. And then just to bounce back up to board leadership, since I didn't get my input on that. One of the big things is, and it's for everything that we do, is communication. Communication internally, communication with the administration, communication with the community. And then with the balance of duties, it's what's assigned, what's delegated. We end up having external involvement in the community. It's making sure that we're on the same page, and that could be any one of us that does the various different things that are potential for out there. Then that the president should take the lead with direction from the rest of the board and the district administrator, just to make sure that we're not going against any state statutes or creating any potential issues moving forward.
Yeah, the only thing I want to add is, but right now what I try to do is I try to put myself outside the board in a way, like, and not think of people, but positions, right? So, because we're creating a governance that will hopefully sustain over time. And so when I do that, I have to think that different people will run things differently, and how will these guiding principles support the vision, right, long term. And I do believe the one voice thing is really critical when it is informed by the entire board. So the board as a whole needs to come to consensus, whatever consensus means for the board at the time. And that message comes from the board president, the vice president, whoever that might be, if need be. And we all have access to the statement for consistency.
Any other discussion on that? All right, the vice president's role. Should the vice president serve only as a backup to the president or also carry specific responsibilities? Are there opportunities for the vice president to lead in key areas, example, board development, policy review? Mrs. Thompson?
I put down here, he should carry, or he, she should carry specific responsibilities, should be in agreement with the president on the board vision and development. And like everyone, you know, ideas are great to bring forth. So,
I think, you know, the vice president would work with the president and delegating tasks as needed for the board or for communication to the public at large. So I think it would be, you know, a relationship where the vice president would, if in the event that the president wasn't able to be, wasn't available, the vice president would be the next in line, obviously, but working together to delegate tasks and to provide outreach to the community.
I think the only thing I can add to that is, I just said, I don't think it's bad sometimes to have the VP lead at times to make the leadership more well-rounded.
Yeah, all I really had in there is, as we move down the strategic planning road, there'll be a liaison for that, folks group. So I thought potentially the vice president could take that on as the strategic planning liaison to the board. Otherwise, don't disagree with everybody else so far.
I have the VP needs to be informed. It's almost like the president with any of the activities that are happening with the district administrator, with the administration. For the exact reason that Brian stated, was that if something would happen that the president can't be here, then it's not having to try to figure it out. That's where it's already known. Then also have checks and balances. So might be where the vice president, if there happens to be two opposing sides, whatever the case might be, that it's to make sure that the president isn't driving the conversation in one particular direction necessarily. If there are valid points that are being brought up on that are in opposition of it, just to make sure that all voices get heard. That might be that parliamentarian is what pops in my head just from some past experience, that there are ones that keep the conversation on track, keep it kind of focused, make sure that it's not just all one side of the discussions happening.
Those are great points, really great points. The other thing I want to add, I don't need to, I'm just saying those are great points. I totally agree that there needs to be checks and balances, that the vice president needs to be in the know as much as the president is, just in case. I mean, we just don't know. There could be a car accident, there could be, you know, who knows, but in any case, there should be two people that are in the know on some of the things that are happening between the board president and the board president and the superintendent. And then the other thing I really wanted to add to this conversation is, and which might blow up a little bit of the traditional way, is I just want us to think about strengths-based positions and strengths-based delegation. And I think that our conversation last time when we talked about like spending more time together, knowing each other a little bit better and understanding where people's strengths lie, will be so helpful in the delegation process. Because if we don't do that and we end up delegating to someone who's feeling ill-equipped, that doesn't support a healthy board, right? Then someone's trying to act in a position where they feel like they should know what they're doing or be the best at it, and they may not be the best at the table, right? And so I just want us to consider, what are some ways that we can be thinking about a strengths-based, delegation of tasks or whatever that might be when it comes to using the board for the best, best interest of the community.
Yes, that'll be critical moving forward as we moved away from the traditional committee setting and everything's going to be more focused on specific things through special ad hoc committees. Strength-based delegation is going to be crucial to putting the right people in those ad hoc committees.
Yeah, I think at some point we can even talk about within the delegation process, is there a mutual acceptance of that, what does that look like? And that could be a policy, could be a practice.
Absolutely.
Nothing to add.
Any other discussion on the vice president's role? All right, the clerk secretary's role should responsibilities include not just legal record keeping, but also community communication. How do we ensure transparency in minutes and board records? Mr. Miller.
Well, I do not have a great handle on changing the responsibilities for the clerk right now. So I think I'm gonna pass this along to the clerk.
Thank you, Brian. I guess this one I was kind of a little bit stumped on as far as, the community communication part. I mean, I'm all about community myself, but I also have the gift of gab, according to my children. So, so I'm just trying to figure out, what community communication that would mean. As far as ensuring the transparency in the minute and the board records, I'm not really sure what more we can do. I mean, I think we have tried so hard to be transparent and, in our meetings. I really wish more people would attend, or be online. One of the things I think that's really great, but it really is more as a board, is the collaboration meetings. I think a lot of people attend those and I've gone to those and I hear so many times people say, oh, I didn't even know they were doing that. I just wish there was some way that we could get the public more involved, to be at the meetings, but I just don't know what else more we could do.
I agree. I don't have anything else to add.
I think a lot of that is just continuing what we're doing as far as transparency. We can't force people to make the effort. And then the communication part, there's a reason that we have a district PR person. That obviously we need to make sure that we're directing that role to what needs to be communicated. I don't know that it's any one of our individuals' responsibility to do that. That's more of a collaboration between us, our district administrator and that marketing person.
Yeah, I agree about that. Sheila, right now you're holding that position and we have a marketing director. And so my first thought was, what is the collaboration between you and her right now? Is there a role and responsibility? Is that part of what you assumed would be part of the role? And if it needs to be, then we can certainly define that. relationship. I did write down, as far as communications that are from the board, we've already kind of talked about, anything that comes from the board should be a one voice kind of thing. And so if we're having a meeting and we have a statement that we want to put out, or we have something that we want to share with the community, that is agreed upon in the meeting, and maybe it's your role then to communicate that with, I don't know what that would look like, but I'm just thinking out loud. And then, when it comes to transparency in minutes and board records, as far as minutes and records are concerned, minutes and records are minutes and records, right? I mean, we can't really change it. I think the barriers to folks attending it has nothing to do with minutes and records. It has to do with access and potentially the location, really. That we're meeting in a school, and not everyone feels that this is a place they want to come for the meeting, right? Or maybe we need to think about having our meetings in different places across the community in the future. Maybe we're holding meetings in different locations. So that we're inviting different people to the meetings and they know that they have closer access to us. But that, I don't think there's anything we can do differently when it comes to minutes and record.
I would just say that I think we've done a great job on providing access to our meetings. They're videoed, they're live streamed, the minutes are published. So I don't see, other than maybe some offbeat and stuff that may or may not work. I think we do a fine job. It's just a lot of people don't tune in unless it's a hot topic.
That's exactly what I had, so I have nothing else to say. Brady just took every word out of my mouth.
All right, is there discussion on the clerk secretary's role? All right, moving on to the treasurer's role. What financial oversight is appropriate at the board officer level? Should the treasurer report regularly to the full board, or is monitoring through operational expectations sufficient? Ms. Troxel.
Let's see here. I guess what I had on what financial oversight is appropriate at the board officer level, I said, making sure audits are done timely, that there's different checks and balances done. One of the things that, I think as far as the board level, everything that we're doing is appropriate. I don't know what more we could do. Should the treasurer report regularly to the full board, or is monitoring through operational is expectations sufficient? I mean, quite honestly, unless you're a CPA, a lot of those things, we have to trust our business manager, we have to trust our administrator, the people that are putting those figures together. And to me, that's what audits are for, and to make sure that they're accurate and that they're done timely. So I don't think that there's much more that a treasurer could do.
Yeah, we touched on a few things that come to mind for me too, so I have nothing else. And
Only thing that I would add is the willingness to question. So if there's something that doesn't seem right, whether it's having regular meetings with business official, district administrator, but just having the willingness to say, hey, this doesn't make sense, explain it to me. And I think we're in a good spot with our finances, with our budget, and with having the information sharing that we have from Mr. Bosworth, that a lot of that I think is fairly transparent at this point already.
And to be fair, any budgetary things goes to the full board anyways.
Yeah, I think large scale, it's important for us to make sure that as we as we go through the strategic planning process and we come to vision, mission, values, goals, that there's an absolute alignment between the goals and how we spend our money. And I think it's gonna be very important right away, for sure, maybe long-term, that we check in on that. Because it's gonna be hard to break old habits and old ways of being. And so unless we are very clear about, we want to see that we are putting the money where it's going to drive us toward this, success and whatever goals we have, then I just think that's gonna be important. So I put quarterly reports.
And I wasn't exactly sure what was being asked here, so in tongue in cheek, my comment was, are we gonna have the treasurer work with the business official 3 or 4 hours a day just so they could get a feel for it? But I think we do a fine job on presenting payments and transfers, and it's in the minutes, so it's published. So anybody at any one time can look at the books, plus we do the budget review. So I think we're doing well there. Maybe a little more explanation on a certain type of fund here and there, but that would come from the business official.
I'd have to agree with that. Actually, when we get the agenda, I do go line by line through the whole expense and everything to look for anything that would be off. But yeah, to be able to question that. But I feel Mr. Bowden does a really good job explaining everything, and he has everything right there. So if we did have a question, he would answer it. And yeah, again, when you look at this online, what the treasurer's role is, it's a full-time job. I mean, a lot of these are with all the different explanations and stuff with it. But yeah, I think definitely, like you said, we have to report to the board. So everything we're doing right now is good.
Just going along with what everyone else has said, that, the budgetary reports and the fiscal reports from their provider are pretty broken down in quite a small degree of detail. So going upon those reports and of course what Mr. Bosworth presents, it seems to be pretty thorough at this point. So I don't see from a treasurer's role, you can't move forward with fiscal decisions without support of the board anyway. So I don't see how the role needs to be changed at this point.
The thought that I had just taken off of Jill's thought with, things are great today with the person that we have today. When we're writing these job descriptions and role responsibilities and such, we need to think, if we have someone new come in that may not necessarily want to be as transparent or be as thorough with the reporting, to make sure that on our side, and it includes all of us, not just the treasurer, but they'd be the point person, make sure that we're getting the information that we need to see and want to see, so that there isn't any potential for issues down the road. If they're bearing reports that, hey, yeah, we're doing great, our fund balance is great, but it really isn't, because they're dipping into it. Because we don't get to see necessarily the line by line payment schedules and sheets. So just to make sure that we're cognizant of the fact that just what we have today with all of us, this group, that it could change in a heartbeat.
Yeah, to piggyback back on that, the superintendent is our one employee. So at the end of the day, we hold the superintendent accountable to the actions of the business official. So agree, but disagree. Yes, I'm going with it.
Well, then it would be willingness to talk to the superintendent, district administrator, hey, this doesn't seem like it's rolling like it has been in the past. It seems like there might be some things that are being missed or whatever. But it all comes out of communication.
All right, any other discussion on the treasurer's role? All right, then we'll move on to officer accountability. How should we hold officers accountable to the board for fulfilling their roles? Should there be a process for officer self-assessment or rotation of roles? So that one starts off with me. Yes, self-assessments is something that's been kicked around for a while as far as how the board self-assesses themselves and their peers as a path forward to hold one another accountable, especially once we get down to our code of conduct, ethics, and all these other policies that define who we are as board members and what our responsibilities are. Self-assessments and peer assessments is going to be extremely important to hold one another accountable and yourselves accountable to your actions, whether it's actions or words. Define policy, roles and responsibilities and assessments. As far as rotation of roles, it's something that I've always had a hard time. It's like, yes, it's important, but also the learning curve can be long as well. And do you really want to rotate roles frequently? Now, if there's, going back to what you were talking earlier, if a person's not either comfortable in the role or there's not the right person for the role, then yes, there absolutely should be, the discussion should take place. But the rotation of the roles is also, it requires restructuring, reorganizing the board, voting, all these other things. I think currently how we do it is probably the right way. Gives you a year to get comfortable in your position, see the dynamics of what the other positions are and such. So I think current state, as far as rotation of roles annually, works well. But again, if people aren't suited for the position or not comfortable, then there absolutely should be a reorganization of roles and responsibilities.
I think any change of roles should be intentional. It doesn't make sense to put somebody in a spot that they're not there. So it has to be a willingness to do it. So Tiffany, you're gonna be president. I don't want to do it. Why put somebody in a position to set them up to fail, essentially? So it goes back to Joe's statement earlier about strengths.
Yeah, I'll just respond to that second part. We have a process for officer self-assessment and rotation of roles. I totally agree, Erin. We should have some type of something, and I know that in policy, the roles are defined, but if even further defining would be this rubric perhaps of proficiency, right? And so that we can self-assess on that rubric and reflect on where am I right now and where do I want to go? And then board members can goal set, personally goal set. And that's where, in addition to like growing with each other, then we go and do further development, professional development to get better at whatever it is we see as something that we could improve on. And I also think that it's important for the community and the admin to have a voice and some feedback and input, and whatever that might look like. I mean, we'd have to define what that looks like, but we could get really comfortable with one another and start validating and seeing missing areas of growth that are maybe obvious to other people. And I think it's important for other people who are counting on us to represent them to maybe have a little bit of input. So I don't know what that would look like, but it's kind of scary to think about. But I think that in best practice, that might be something you consider.
Nothing to add.
Nothing to add.
Nothing to add.
I just had a couple things. How should we hold officers accountable to the board for fulfilling their roles? I just said be present, attend the meetings, participate, get in the conversation. Also, on the second one, should there be a process for officer self-assessment of rotation of roles? I totally agree that, if someone's not comfortable in that role, but also I think we also have to be professional enough that to have constructive criticism. So if there's something that we're seeing that we're not comfortable with, that we're able to share that with that person and see if maybe there's a better approach of handling certain areas. That's all I have.
Yeah, I thought of how we can have a platform to have those discussions. As it was, what it would look like, what it would feel like. I've thought about it. We're not there yet, but at least I'm not personally, but I'm open to feedback from folks on that, because I think, feedback is really important. I do one-on-ones with my team frequently. For us, we can do one-on-ones, but we also, as a board collectively, I think, talking about what's happened and learning from it is equally as important as those sidebar conversations. I don't know if I agree with that. I didn't like that. Whatever. I think it's good though as a board to have those discussions.
I think that's how we grow.
It's how you learn
Mhm.
and grow. Absolutely. It's how you change and adapt as well, and learn more about one another. One of the things, just to add to it, that comes to mind for me, as far as public self-assessments. When we get we go down that strategic planning route and we have that subset of people that are representing, the goals and priorities and expectations of the district, those folks, just like we would evaluate the administrator on those things, that group of people can also have the ability to evaluate the board, that group of people that were involved in this pretty big process. Once it plays out, those folks can probably do an assessment of the board. And do we meet, exceed, or fail, needs improvement, on the expectations that they gave us? So it's absolutely something that I think is possible. All right, any other discussion on officer accountability?
We've kind of saying it in a different way. Once we have the expectation set, we do expect what we expect. So it's having those conversations that, hey, maybe you're missing a little bit here, missing a little bit there, just having communication. So having that all come down. If you feel that something's not right or feel something's off a little bit, it has to be open enough to have those conversations, and then we need to be open enough to receive those.
Not to go way off topic here, but the beautiful thing with the strategic planning process is the people that are involved in that group, they're the ones that are setting the direction. The board is in the back seat. We're not the ones pulling the strings, we're calling the shots. So it'll be easier, for them to assess us and evaluate us on how we performed to their expectations. All right, anything else? We're gonna move on to GC5. All right, we will move on to GC5, then the code of conduct, ethical standards. What ethical expectations should guide every board member? Should we explicitly prohibit conflicts of interest and define recusal requirements? Mr. Bailey.
I guess it's perceptions matter was probably the biggest thing that I have on here. Moral and legal obligations. So if it's not right, it's not right. Doesn't matter if it trying to slide something through. And the explicitly prohibit conflicts of interest, I guess some of that, you have to define what that really is. We've had different conversations on that, on whether we need to abstain from a vote or not. Is the biggest thing that I feel with that is if we have transparency on it and it doesn't directly benefit us financially, which I think is the definition for that, that it makes sense to have your voice heard still. And there's legal versus perceived. So some of that, I guess I kind of go against myself a little bit, that if it's perceived as it being a conflict of interest to the public, then maybe it actually is, even if it legally isn't. So we just have to be mindful of the direction we take.
Oh, what ethical expectations should guide every board member? Our ethics should align with values of the community. We should fulfill our duties with care, loyalty, and obedience to the expectations of the community. Avoid using positions for personal gain, right? So kind of the same thing. Treat everyone with dignity and respect. Make decisions based on the community input and values. And acknowledge our biases. I think that is part of ethics. So I think it's important for us to check each other and ourselves on our potential biases so that we are not overemphasizing one thing over another based on our personal experience or experiences in the past.
Nothing to add.
Definitely participating in a fair and honest manner, with no hidden agendas, nothing for self-gain, acting in the best interest of the students. Respect is one thing I have down on here for, everyone. As far as the conflict of interest, I guess clearly defining what circumstances constitute a conflict of interest. A lot of it is, if you're gonna get personal gain or whatever out of it. Like with the last board meeting, I abstained from a thing just because of possibly the community could see that as a conflict of interest with the other board that I'm on. And then with part of that being that there could be a conflict of interest is, I guess I can say this now because it's done, it's voted on, it's done. I was 100% in favor of it, but I felt like I should not add to the discussion or any part of it because I could sway maybe a vote one way or another on it. So when it comes to a conflict of interest, just completely stepping back and not having a say in any of it whatsoever, I guess is how I feel about that. And can't think of her name right now. She's not here. But then that should go in the minutes to the reason for abstaining or whatever is because of a conflict of interest. That needs to be stated and recorded in the minutes versus just not letting the public know why. Because they could be sitting back thinking, oh, she doesn't agree with it, but she's not going to say no. She's just not voting. So actually having that recorded in the minutes, I think, is appropriate.
And to go along with what's already been said, I guess recognizing the potential for personal bias in situations are brought towards the board. And as far as explicitly prohibiting conflicts of interest and defining recusal requirements, I think those are already addressed in the policies that we have now, as far as if there is a conflict of interest and under which circumstances to recuse your vote. So that is in our current policy, and I don't know that we need to change that at this point. But maybe as going forward, that's something we can look at again.
As far as ethical expectations for board members, I just had down honesty, integrity, trustworthy, and always leading by example. And as far as the conflicts of interest, I agree with everything that's been said, and there's been times that I have reached out to Mr. Ward to make sure if I have a conflict of interest, but again, even sometimes if he says, you know, you don't have any gain, I will still abstain for those same reasons, but I do think it's important that Tiffany said that the public understands why we're abstaining one way or another. That's all I have.
I don't have much to add. You actually just took a couple of my words away from me, so thank you. I just summarized it as like unbiased, integrity, honesty, trustworthy, consistent. There's a lot more words you can throw in there too, but to me, those are the ones that first came to mind. As far as ethical expectations. Conflicts of interest can be pretty broad, so. I think we'd have to probably do some definitions on what a conflict of interest means. But even if we did that, we would still be missing some because it's so broad. Recusal, yes, I agree with you, Mrs. Thompson. As far as going on the record. I don't have anything else, any other further discussion on this?
Thought that just popped up during discussions, doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do, even when nobody's looking. That's ethical, that's integrity.
All right, civility and professionalism. How should board members demonstrate respect in meetings with staff community? Should we adopt a commitment to avoid surprises at meetings and assume good intent? Sure.
It's like it's setting me up on this one.
It was by design.
That's so.
You reverse engineer.
If you're not comfortable, I can have somebody else.
Oh,
lead.
no.
We just talked about that.
So how should the board members demonstrate respect in meetings and staff? I think that our conversation we just had, right, like just bring the ethics to those situations. So it's really listening, like listen, really listen. Don't listen to respond. Don't listen to form an opinion. Listen to hear and really deeply seek to understand. And so what I have is practice curiosity and lean in. Like make sure they recognize that you do really want to understand. And if you're asking questions, it's because you're curious and you want to know more about it. Should we adopt a commitment to avoid some surprises at meetings and assume good intent? This is really a hard one for me because I so deeply want community members to be able to come to the board and talk to us. And I've experienced the reasons why there are safeguards put in place, right? So that people aren't harassed in meetings and called out, you know, all of the things that could potentially happen. And so I think we need to talk about what does the middle look like. And if it's a topic, and you know, right now we have celebrations and acknowledgements, which is a beautiful thing. I think that's a great shift for us. But I think that we can also ask for concerns and topics that for discussion. Maybe those are brought to us separately or given to us in a different way. So that we can first take it in a little bit and then meet with them in person to ask more questions that we might be curious about. That's just something that are coming up for me. So I don't have an answer or a solution, I guess, but I do think it's important that community feels welcome. And that often has to do with the environment that we set.
So always be respectful and courteous. On the other section, adopt a commitment to avoid surprises at meetings and assume good intent. If it's a questionable subject, board members should ask the board president and the district superintendent in private for more information. And that basically is to prevent rumors from happening. Because sometimes somebody reports something that they feel is fact. And during the investigation, it turns out it was just a rumor that was started somewhere else. And that can create a lot of hurt feelings and very uncomfortable discussions for people. So that would be my suggestion, is that it's always asked in private first. And then if the discussion needs to happen at board level, then we go to that.
How should we demonstrate respect? I have here actively listening. Even if we disagree with what's being said, that we do not show it publicly. Or we don't show it, on our faces or whatever as we're discussing. That we listen, I guess, with good intent is a good way of putting it too. Being prepared and being present, we're here, we're discussing things at a board level, we're all engaged. We're not, and obviously none of us have whipped out our cell phones and started, doing stuff on our cell phones and just kind of disengaging from that. So definitely being present, speaking constructively, supporting decisions, even if we vote against it, that we still support the decision that in the end. Second part here, I have, yes, it builds trust and transparency. It moves us away from a culture of blame and towards us focusing on solutions as far as with the whole, assuming good intent with this. So it leads us to have a more productive and a healthier work environment for us if we model after that.
Similar to what everyone else has expressed, and again, I've written to listen and try to remain impartial to the concerns of the staff and community. And should we adopt a commitment to avoid surprises? Well, to go along with what Brady said, maybe have that discussion in private first, and if it needs to be brought to the board, because I think it's good to be able to formulate a thoughtful position or response to a concern instead of strictly reacting to emotion. So I think to have time to think these arguments out and to weigh both sides of it, try to come to a consensus there, and hopefully among the board pursue it in that manner.
Well, I pretty much had about the same thing, I just said to listen and to be heard. I think that's what's really important, that they feel like they're being, their conversation with you is really important to us, and that they just want to be heard. And I agree with what Brady and Brian said too, as far as the second part.
I don't have much different to add other than speaking to facts and avoiding personal opinions and bias. As far as a commitment to avoid surprises at meetings, we already got the informal policy in place on that. But to me, being prepared, coming prepared to a meeting and being engaged is something that everybody has to continually work on. Myself included, all of us, be prepared, be engaged. Because if you're prepared, you will follow that informal policy to get questions answered ahead of time, ahead of the meeting, or having something pulled from consent for whatever reason, whether it's a conflict of interest or whatever. If we're prepared, paying attention, engaged, we could avoid blind sides in meetings, everything else. I think for the most part, done a pretty good job at that, but it's something, like I said, all of us, myself included, you know, we should continually work on being prepared and being engaged.
Yep.
Okay. That's a first, your speeches.
Who's
Wow.
taking notes?
Wow.
What I have is what's already been said.
No, that's fine. All right. Anything else anybody wants to add under the civility and professionalism? Okay, we will move on then to collective responsibility. What does it mean to speak with one voice after a decision? How do we balance individual conscious with the board's need for unity? That one is Mr. Dowden.
On that, if there's a topic that's voted on that has altered opinions, once the vote is made, that's the direction that's decided. And so you should support that. It doesn't mean you don't have your opinion on it, but you should support it. I guess that's all I got on that.
I have down here that we present a unified and consistent message to the public. That, that, you know, when the vote is done, that is it. I know when people have asked me different things, I always say, it's not just I feel it's the board feels this, the board voted on this, the board is in agreement on this. It's never a individual thing. Second part of this is I have open communication, value each different perspective and defining clear processes for decision making. But everybody is respected no matter what their position is, and we stand as one in the end.
I agree as well. I mean, everyone's entitled to their own personal opinions on topics, but as a board, we're collective. So once that vote is made, then that's the direction we're moving towards. And if we don't stand together, we'll break apart. So I think it's important that there's some sense of cohesiveness and unity. Even, you know, I mean, that's what the votes are for. If somebody disagrees with the topic, they're given that forum to express that. But the vote is ultimately decided by the majority, and that's what we'll go with. To maintain cohesiveness, yes.
Pretty much I had the same thing. After a vote passes, we support the decision in unison as a board. And then how do we balance individual conscience with the board's need for unity? I did put down that this is probably more of a difficult one, because if you stand firm in your position, but ultimately you have to come to peace with the board's decision and support it.
Really, all I have that's indifferent from what's already been said is we've already kind of made this stance is if you're against something, I want to know why. You know, we owe it to not just the public, the constituents, our electors, but we also as board members owe it to one another. If we're not in favor of something, we need to say something. Number one, you can go on the it'll go on the record as to why you're against it. And the hope is it would provoke conversations. At the end of the day, collectively compromising should be what we're doing, because really nothing that we do is so divisive where we should be split. Almost everything we do, we really should be either all for or all against. And even the tough conversations, you know, as far as the individual conscience, the hard decisions that we've had to make in the past, we really had no choice. we were bound by law. Like, there's nothing we can do about it. And even in those situations, our personal opinions, our personal bias, our own conscience on a subject that even if you're not for it, if legally we're bound to it, we should still support it, whether it's in a meeting setting or publicly. Because playing games with votes, in my opinion, just shows division. But again, for me personally, I feel compromising and coming to a consensus is important. We really haven't had many of these situations, but when they come up, hopefully we can do that. Amend emotions, make changes, compromise, whatever, to come from a division to unity, and then publicly support that vote, that message. That's all I had in there.
One of the notes I had with they speak with one voice, it's easy to undermine the decision if you're on the opposite side of the vote per se. Oh yeah, we decided to do this, but you eliminate that part of it. And we agreed as a board. And if, and we've talked about it with like social media and such like that, speaking as an individual versus speaking as a board member, I think that's a tough, very fine line, so you just have to be careful. And just reiterating the discussion before the decision. We all have, the floor is open for us to bring up our thoughts, our concerns, anything that we may or may not agree with. So just not being shy about having an opposing view.
Yeah, I think the only thing that I would add, and goes to the second question, how do we balance individual conscious board with the board's need for unity? If we are experiencing an ethical dilemma about a conversation that it just isn't in alignment with our values personally, we have got to be, we've got to be willing to have some dialogue around that. And then like Sheila said, if it doesn't go the way we'd like it to personally, we've got to be able to come to a place, and I put, emotional intelligence is a big deal on a board, right? You've got to be able to find a spot where you can live with it and not outwardly on your face and all about, your emotions. Don't let your emotions get the best of you, but recognize that you're acting on behalf of a group. And that's a skill. And so it is going to be important for us to have accountability partners or, people that we can check in with to give us some feedback when those things happen. And again, I think it comes back to the more we spend time together, the easier those conversations are going to be.
Any other discussion on collective responsibility? Okay, so move on then to public conduct. I will say comment. So just say public comment. So public conduct. How should board members communicate publicly about board actions? Should we establish guidelines for distinguishing personal opinion from the board's official stance? This one starts off with Mrs. Thompson.
I kind of feel like we've already kind of talked about all of this already in a public meeting. Designate a spokesperson. Thinking of the community meeting that was held a month and a half ago. Just having one spokesman person for the board versus many voices for them to ask questions. General public should be transparent, aligned with board decisions, unified approach, saying board decisions, not just an individual position. Trying to stay away from personal opinion. We're all in this sort of thing, will come in the end. So. Pretty much all I have on there.
Feel the same. I think probably just speaking with one spokesman for the board to express, the board's sentiment and message, probably be the best. Try to eliminate engaging in, for me at least, engaging in personal interactions after the board decisions been made as much as I can. Just have a spokesman for the board, make those kind of decisions or public appearances.
I would agree with that. I think legally, sometimes it's a real fine line. And, our board meetings are an open session, they're welcome to watch those and review those, but I think sometimes having one spokesperson for the board, might help that. As far as establishing guidelines, we're 7 individual people, we're all gonna have our own opinions. But I think we need to stand united with the vote, and that's how we come out, is that, that we're united in whatever the board decides.
Yeah, I really only had one thing for this, because a lot of this was already answered in other topics. So really all I had for this was, we're 1 of 7. So your conduct in public, that should always be in the forefront of your mind, is you're 1 person of 7, and that one individual cannot speak on behalf of the board. Like if you're cornered at Walmart, right? Like, so, but it's very different than having a spokesperson for the board. This is like when you're out in the public and somebody corners you. The one thing that comes to mind as far as public conduct is always being aware that you're 1 person of 7, and that you should never speak on behalf of the board, nor should you ever make promises that you may not be able to keep, because that in itself can undo a lot of the trust and integrity and all the things that we've worked hard to establish and rebuild. That's all I had.
I had with the personal opinion side of things, there's an appropriate time to share, that'd be during our discussion time. Then after the decisions are made, be able to shift your stance, your personal thoughts to a positive light on there, that there may be opportunity in the future, whatever the case might be for the discussion. And first thing, and probably the most important thing, is it's the stance of the district, 1 hive. It's pretty simple.
I don't have anything to add.
Wow, you're speechless.
No, you fancy bird said it all. Never speechless.
So I just had a question on it said, should we establish guidelines? For me, what would that look like? And then another point would be having an open dialogue with the community is very important. But to piggyback on Aaron's comment, you're 1 vote, so don't promise anything that you can't deliver on. Because it has to go, majority vote to get there.
Any other discussion on public conduct? Gotta write that down. All right, move on to accountability then. So what happens if a member violates the code of conduct? Should consequences include informal correction, formal censure, or other steps? So it starts with Mr. Miller.
Well, I guess, thinking about this, it kind of, for me, it kind of depend on the degree of the infraction or behavior. I think it's probably, there's gradations of what the violation would be, and it could include informal correction or formal censure, I guess. But I think that process would need to be brought up through the board, and had to be agreement on what the degree of correction needs to take place. So I think yes, I think it can include all those things, but I think it depends on what the infraction is.
I had down, we need to evaluate, exactly what was the code of conduct, issue. Also, is it the same type of conduct violation, is it over and over the same exact thing? I do want to say that we always have to remember that every board member comes in at different times. And so sometimes that someone new might not realize, some of the issues that maybe they're creating. So I think we just always have to be aware of that. And then, at what point do we just give warnings, and then once, that, it's past that warning time, then we take action. Because ultimately, we are bound by legal issues as well, and we have to be very careful with that.
Yeah, agree with all that. I don't really have much to add. Cause there'll be different degrees. In my opinion, and those are things that we have to define. But to go back to personal evaluations and peer evaluations, that in itself should hopefully curb public censures, et cetera, if we're holding one another accountable before it becomes a problem to begin with. That's all I really had on it.
The only additional thing I have on there is, going back to the roles of the president. If it's not the president who violates code of conduct, that's our point person to have those conversations. And like most things, it's reprimand in private and praise in public.
Yeah, the only thing I had was the checks and balances that you just addressed. If it's the board president, then we have to have a process in place, right? And the other thing, if it's something that is affecting many people on the board, it may be in our best interest to have an outside party, either hired or to facilitate. Because let's be honest, sometimes things can get very emotional, and they can hit really deeply. And if we're all having some type of feeling and we're, operating on feelings and not thinking, I think just sometimes we should be able to vote for support if we need support by getting support from somebody neutral.
I believe there's some sort of policy on this. It's been a while since I've looked into it, but the big question was, what are we legally able to do? What steps can be taken? And I think that needs to be presented to new board members. So they're aware of what happened if you are disrespectful or cause a scene, whatever you want to say.
Any other discussion on accountability? All right, let's finish this up then with commitment to students and community. How does ethical conduct link directly to student success and public trust? Should we frame this code as not just rules, but a commitment to our community? This one is Mr. Axel.
Well, mine was pretty simple. I would say 100% they're looking up to us to set a standard for them. And I absolutely think that we should frame this as a code and not just rules.
The only thing I have that's indifferent from that is unity through compromise. And this should be a commitment to our community and not just rules. So as we go down the public engagement process through the strategic planning and the meetings of our peers and such, hopefully should, define what that commitment means. And ultimately, will probably be reflected in our own mission statement, which we can rewrite and change. That's all I really had that was different.
The only thing I can add is lead by example. If students are first and we're leading the district down path. And if we can't look at the kids and say, hey, we're doing this for you, trying to make you be as successful and as good a human being as possible, then we might not be doing the right thing.
Yeah, all of that, model the behaviors we wanted to see in others. Definitely, this is more than just a commitment. It's a code of, and it's an ethical responsibility that we're taking on. So as we think about our behaviors in meetings like this and other places, even individually, so when I think about dialogue and confronting and being able to talk about hard issues and actually speaking our truth, right? And I think that if we get good at it, we can model for the community and for our students. What does it look like to have productive conversation? And rather than making it normal to feel ucky, when we don't agree, to make it okay. And to help people understand that that's an okay thing. And let that be a model for our students so that when they move into their adult life, they're not afraid to speak their truth, yet be curious about someone else's and find the compromise.
I would just throw the word professionalism in there.
First part about that, I have establishes a foundation of integrity, transparency, and accountability. It gives a safe, respectful learning environment, promotes integrity, boosts students' confidence and their engagement. I feel when we are linked directly to the student success with public trust, ensuring fairness, accountability with that. The last part, kind of a big thought here. Ethical contact demonstrates a genuine concern for students' well-being and fosters a respectful environment, which increases students' engagement and persistence. In turn, transparency and fairness in decision-making builds trust with the public, families, and the wider community, creating stronger partnerships essential for public education to thrive.
Well said.
Yes, I consider it comes down to expectations of, the expectations are for our staff and students to act in an ethical manner, then there should be no less of the expectation on our part to also promote code of ethics as well. So no less of expectation on their part than what we're expecting.
Any other discussion on commitment to students and community?
Thought just popped in my head as far as the public trust. If we're doing what's right for the kids, if we're doing things the right way because it's right, there should be no reason to have any kind of public backlash per se. It might be some things like the phone policy that wasn't popular, but it was the right thing. So I think if we keep that in mind, that even hearing comments about the purchase of Melville and the gymnasium and the property, that's coming out now. That I think we all agree that that's the right thing to do for our kids. and moving forward for the district to give our kids the best possible outcomes. So even though it wasn't necessarily a popular decision, I think it was a right decision, so I'm just keeping that in mind.
Anything else?
When it comes to the overall code of conduct, I'd still like to spend a little bit more time as a board someday, coming back to public conduct. I felt like when we talked about that just now, we weren't completely focused on like what you had said, Aaron, which is like when you're out in Walmart, when you're at the grocery store or out for dinner, right, and you get cornered. What is that? How do you respond? I'd like to spend a little bit more time on that someday.
Absolutely. Just to wrap this up, I would encourage folks to go on the district website because there's a lot of board policies that already cover some of these things. So I would ask, just familiarize yourself with what we currently have today. If you have questions, just reach out. If some of these topics are hard to find an answer for, or whatever, just know that quite a bit of this stuff actually already sort of exists today, just just word it differently. Would you agree with that, Mr. Dowden?
Yes.
Okay, yes, because I actually have printed off a summary today of board member roles and responsibilities. And speaking on behalf of the board is in here. Authority of individual board members, ethical conduct, conflicts of interest, and incompatibility of offices. There's a lot of information that we currently have today, so just go out there and peruse it. And like I said, if anybody has any questions, just let me know. We'll just continue having these open discussions. All right, with that, I see we do not have the rest of these, so I will follow up with the board and have them printed off and put in our mailboxes for our next board meeting next week. So does that give folks enough time to go through a couple of these GCs to be ready for the following week, or do you need more time? Okay.
Or is it 3 weeks in a row?
Three weeks in a row means we have a regular scheduled board meeting next week.
Yeah.
Then the week after is another
We meet-
one of these.
okay.
And if anybody for some reason can't attend next week's meeting, just reach out and we can get it to you some other way. Through email or stop in and pick it up. All right, great discussion. Thank you so much, everybody. I really do appreciate it. This is fun stuff. So with that, it was 8:45. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Motion made by Ms. Sharp. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right. Discussion?
That one's
One
good.
time.
Sorry, I'm taking notes here since I don't have anybody. So, all right. We have a motion in a second. Want to vote?
Yeah, aye.
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 Thank you.
Somebody said
What did you want this time?
Next week, we're here Monday and Wednesday. Right?
Oh, yeah, there's a,
Yes, there's
There's a closed
special
session
meeting on Monday.
on Monday the 10th.
So we could always pick that up out of our
Yeah.
mailboxes
Good
on
point.
Monday.
Yeah, don't forget, we have close on Monday. And that's at 6, I think. 6 o'clock. Good call, Stephanie. Missing a little boy. But I'm missing a little boy. He was supposed to be in here. I don't know where it is.
I'm missing a boy too, but my boy is off to the Marines, so
You're really missing.
I'm really missing him.
You got? Or-
He has been gone at the end of this week. It'll be 2 weeks.
Wow.
2 weeks into his 13,
Where do you go for vacation?
San Diego.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
Lucky.
I know.
I
was
had to
gonna
go to
say.
boot camp at Great Lakes down by Chicago.
Oh,